There comes a point in the life of men where they need to reject passivity, accept responsibility, and lead courageously.
Most of the struggling youth that I have dealt with had a father that chose not to lead.
Yeah.
Or chose to abandon them, which is a choice to not lead their family.
Jesus, who is God, humbled himself and did what we needed him to do because we needed him to do it. That is an absolute picture of servant leadership.
You're going to lead your wife, you're going to lead your kids. If you don't have a family, you're going to lead your habits, you're going to lead your disciplines,
Right.
You're going to lead your character development. To not put emphasis on what it looks like to be a leader and how to do it right is a detriment not only to yourself, but to society itself.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the March or Die Show today. Glad to have you joining us. This is the show where we do our very best to give you both the principles and perspectives you need to march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die. And very thankful to be able to have this conversation with you, just to share some things that we've learned and experienced and some principles that we put into practice that have been a help to us. And really thankful that you would join us on this journey. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker, here with Sean Kennard. And again, excited to have you along. If you're not yet subscribed to the show, please do that right now. Subscribe right now. Sometimes people ask, why do you start with subscribe instead of end with subscribe? I end with it as well, but most of you, and you know who you are, don't listen all the way to the end. So I have to play to my audience, and my audience likes to jet out about halfway through. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It gets best at the end.
Stay for
so
the
you're
good
missing
stuff.
the best part if you're not sticking around.
Yeah.
But anyhow, right here at the beginning, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, whatever platform you're listening from. And then please take some time, go over to YouTube. If you're not watching already on YouTube, and check out the content there. A lot of great content there. The podcast, of course, with our guests. And it's always fun to watch those conversations. But other content going there as well. Hard questions.
Yes, hard questions.
We do our best to deal with some hard questions.
Yeah.
As the title would imply.
Yeah.
And we have just about every week we have a new hard question going up there and other great content coming along. So would love to have you join us there on the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, search March or Die Show. You'll find the channel, subscribe, and all of that content will come directly to you. There you go.
That's right.
That's my announcement right up front.
That's a good one.
A lot of other good things coming as well. If you receive, and you should be, if you're not already on our mailing list, and you can go to marchordie.com, our website, subscribe to the mailing list there so you get this content, other content. But if you're subscribed there, you know that we are pushing out new content and new really instructional content, a lot of good things coming your way in the days ahead. So I want to make you aware of that. Be watching out for that. All right, that was a lot.
It's good.
Said a lot.
You gotta
I don't know if it was good or not, but I said a lot. But we're going to jump into our conversation today. And today we're going to talk about leadership. But we're going to talk about leadership from a biblical perspective. I think that's the right way to view everything, not just leadership. But really considering and understanding leadership from a biblical perspective at a moment in time when the world is as confusing as it's ever been, culture's upside down, and it can be very difficult to know how to lead, whether that's leading yourself, leading your family, leading in a workplace, leading in culture at large. How do we do that, and how do we understand that? The Bible has a lot to say about it, and I want to just take a few minutes today and talk about that.
Yeah, I'm excited for this episode. I think that leadership obviously is so powerful. Leadership creates culture. The culture that is under whatever is at the helm of the leadership is defined by the people who are leading. Yeah. And so I've been in places where there's really, really poor leadership. Yeah. I've been in places where there's really, really great leadership. Yeah. And so I think it's an important topic, and I know we're kind of talking about it overall, but also specifically more so directed towards men. Because again, that is where I think as a society, at least from my experience and my opinion, is where we're struggling. I think men are struggling to lead. I think it has a lot to do with the choice not to lead, and then the misunderstanding or lack of knowledge of how to lead.
So the choice not to lead.
Yeah, I think that again, in my experience and when I've dealt with in working in the community, is that men will choose to either abdicate their role, or just abandon it altogether.
Yeah.
And most of the, coming from law enforcement, most of the struggling youth that I have dealt with had a father that chose not to lead, or chose to abandon them, which is a choice to not lead their family, right? Yeah. So that's what I mean by choice not to lead. And then those kids grow up without the knowledge of how to lead, right? So then we kind of can create this cycle, this vicious cycle of men not filling their roles as leaders, which then raises other men to misunderstand what it looks like to lead in those roles. And so, anyways, I think it's important to define what biblical leadership is. You good?
Sorry.
You got it?
Right.
You got a little coffee? Need some water?
Keep going. Keep going.
I think it's important to define what biblical leadership is.
Yep.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I think that we need to understand that leadership is part of our identity. Right. And you've said before, and I love this, I've stolen this from you, that we should not be asking the question, what makes a man, but asking the question, who makes a man? And it's God who designs in us, creates in us what we are designed to be. Yeah. And one of those things is a leader. Yeah. And it's a servant leader. It's not a tyrant leader. Yeah. In today's world, I think we define leaders based off of status. Right. And platform. Yeah. And I know we're sitting here on a podcast, right? Right. But there's a way to steward that properly, and there's a way to steward it improperly. And at the end of the day, every man is going to lead something. You're going to lead your wife. You're going to lead your kids. If you don't have a family, you're going to lead your habits. You're going to lead your disciplines. Right. You're going to lead your character development. And so to not put emphasis on what it looks like to be a leader and how to do it right is a detriment not only to yourself, but to society itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at the top of the show, I said this is the show where we talk about principles and perspectives to March. And this is really, it's both of those things. It's a perspective. It's the right perspective on that thing we call leadership, but then the principles behind that. So how do we understand it, and how do we onboard that into our lives? There's a quote that I use a lot when I'm talking about leadership from Robert Lewis, who is he's an author. He's written a lot on manhood and raising boys and a lot of great content on being a man. But he uses this, or makes this statement, and I've used it a lot. There comes a point in the life of men where they need to, he says, three things: reject passivity, accept responsibility, and lead courageously. Reject passivity. So that's the kind of making the decision to lead, right? We all accept this idea of passive living. My wife is strong-willed. My wife has a direction she wants us to go. So I'm just going to let that happen. Or my kids are out of control, so I'm going to go do my own thing and just try to keep them safe, or whatever. It's a lot of reasons that we choose not to engage in leadership. And he says you need to reject passivity. Reject that life of passive living. That's the first step. And then accept responsibility. Again, we've talked about this a lot, but you're not responsible for everything, but what you are responsible for, you need to be 100% responsible for. But until you reject passivity, saying, I'm not going to lay here anymore, and then accept responsibility for the things that you can control, you can't do the third thing, which is lead courageously. Yeah. So it's reject passivity, accept responsibility, and lead courageously. And I love that statement because it speaks to what you just said. It's understanding I was created to be a leader. Yeah. God put that within me, and I need to accept the responsibility of that and then lead courageously. It's not just leading. Leading is only fun, probably, if you're not doing it right. Yeah. Because real leadership, it requires courage. It requires standing up against the naysayers and the friction and the pushback and, what culture throws at us, what our family often throws at us, what people we work around throw at us. Courageously standing up and doing the right thing. And I think that's that's the starting point. So, getting into a conversation like this, someone could dismiss everything else that we're going to say unless they're first willing to say, all right, I want to engage in this. And I think that's a really important place to start.
Yeah, I agree. So with that lens, I think it would be important to look at what that model, what is the perfect model, right? Yeah. And so obviously we're talking about biblical leadership.
Yeah.
So Jesus is the model, right? And he came, to your point, to serve. He came took ownership, right? Took responsibility, was courageous, stepped into areas that were hard and challenging, called other men, and challenged them to be something greater than what they were. And I think we have to view it through that lens of Jesus as the model, right? And because we could all sit here and look at, Andrew Tates of the world and
right.
The Liver King. Now you see there's a Liver King documentary out now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
are you in that?
I'm not in it. I'm like, man, I didn't make it. I didn't make the cut.
People may not know your background.
Yeah. I used to work with Liver King. I used to work, with the supplement company that he had.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. We'll do another podcast on that. Right. But to the point of, leadership is such a dynamic thing, and there's so many examples out there. If we don't point to a truth, a ground truth, and Jesus is that ground truth, then we could be swayed and we could be misled on what it looks like to lead our families properly.
So, man, that's a great point, and that is the starting point. The starting point. So I typically think of this in the structure that I think about leadership is. And we go back to creation, realizing we're created in the image of God. But it's the example, a definition, and then what leadership looks like. Not what leadership in a particular environment looks like, but leadership, defined. What does that look like? And how do we build that out? And so starting with that example it's exactly right. Jesus Christ is the example. So what does that mean? I get excited when I think about this, right? Because it's so clear. It's so clear in Scripture. What does it mean? All right, well, Jesus, first of all, he's God. Now, we could argue that. That's maybe a hard question, right? We've talked about that a little bit. But let's just accept here on our podcast where we get to say whatever we want to.
That's right.
That the Bible says Jesus is God because it does. What does that mean? So Jesus as God, we could go to Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 8, says he created the world. Okay, so he's the creator. Eternity past, the decision was made by God to create what is today the world. That means the planet that we're on, all of the systems that create life and sustain life, all of the animals, the plants, and humans. He created all of it. He's God. So what does that mean? He doesn't need us.
Yeah.
Man that he created rebelled against him. Sin entered the world. There's now a rift between God and man. Something needs to be done, and only God can fix that, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jesus, God, leaves heaven, he comes to earth, he enshrines or enrobes himself in human flesh. All God, all man, the Bible teaches us all of this. He walks perfect and sinless, dies on the cross, murdered at the hands of his own creation, declaring himself to be God through the resurrection. Okay, so that's who Jesus is. What we learn from that is he's all-powerful. He even made this declaration to his disciples in Matthew chapter 28 when he said, all power is given to me in heaven and earth, right? So he's God, entirely God. He doesn't need us, but he did for us what we could not do for ourselves.
Yeah.
Philippians chapter 2 defines this so well when it talks about relationships between people in the church, and then it says of Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. So he's God, he knew it. It's always clear, but made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men and humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. This is Philippians chapter 2. So what do we learn about leadership in this? And I've long said that Philippians chapter 2 is the best leadership chapter in the Bible. Jesus, who is God, who didn't need us, but we needed him to do what only he could do, humbled himself and did what we needed him to do because we needed him to do it. That is an absolute picture of servant leadership. There was nothing he was trying to get out of us. There was nothing he needed from us. He wasn't angling for something, wasn't manipulating for something. He completely poured himself out when he did not have to, so that we could benefit from the salvation, the redemption, the reconciliation to him that would come from that. That's why Ephesians 5 tells husbands to love their wives as Christ loved the church, because the example is you need to be completely selfless. Not husbands manipulate your wives to get them to do what you want them to do, but lead them sacrificially. And so, yeah, it begins with that example. Who's the example of leadership? Greatest example of leadership that we could possibly follow? Jesus Christ. Why? Because he's God.
Yeah.
And he did what only God could do. And that required him to go through the process of being murdered by his creation to rise again of his own power 3 days later.
Yeah.
That's your sermonette for the day.
So good. So let's talk practical application for people who are listening, right? How does somebody do that in today's world? What would be your answer to that?
So we talk about servant leadership, right?
Yeah.
And I've said this a lot. When I teach on leadership, I talk about how there was a time in my life where I was confused about what leadership was, because I came from this hyper-aggressive military leadership in the Marine Corps. And then I went into the church world and saw this kind of like, in a lot of, this is not universal, right? But this was something that I observed, that there's a lot of manipulation happening.
Yeah.
But both of them have the same goal. It's getting people to do what I want them to do for some benefit to myself.
Yeah.
Well, when we look at Jesus, what we see is that he did what he did for the benefit entirely 100% of those that he was serving or leading. And so going from an example to a definition, the definition that I use of leadership is moving people from where they are to where they need to be. Devoid in that definition is so that they can give me what I want. A leader is someone that says, I have gifts, I have opportunities, I have resources, I have influence, whatever it is that I have, and I'm going to use the things that I've been given completely for the benefit of those that I lead.
Yeah.
Whether that's my children, my spouse, people in my workplace, whatever the environment, I'm going to use everything that I have. I'm going to leverage what I've been given for the benefit of those that I lead. And so, I think practically it's that. It's looking at the people in your world and saying, what do I have that will help them advance?
Yeah.
To me, that's leadership. We would then naturally talk about the difference between leadership and management. Some people refuse to be led and they have to be managed. And management is, I'm going to make you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But it's much better to be led. And a leader is someone that says, I've got a bunch of stuff that I can use to help someone else grow, develop, learn, advance, whatever. And I'm going to use that for their benefit and probably not get anything out of it. And I'll stop talking in a second.
No, it's good.
But the crazy thing about that type of leadership is the leader always benefits from that.
Yeah.
And the organization benefits.
Yeah.
When you go into something not trying to benefit, there may be a moment where you don't. But eventually, if you're consistent in that type of leadership, the return on that is incredible. So everyone wins.
No, that's good. I like that a lot. There's a lot of practical application to that, both in the workplace and at home. I'm very passionate about the at-home leadership just because, again, maybe it's just because I was exposed to such broken kids. Such broken kids, and every broken kid came from a broken home. And I'm not saying that, you can't, that if you do everything 100% perfect, that your child is going to also be 100% perfect. Now, children make mistakes, right? But I often think that the home is the first battlefield for this, right? So I think that, just as encouragement for men who may be listening, start to put these principles into play at home, because the husband that your wife needs is found in the Bible, and the father that your children need is found in the Bible. Those principles that we talk about come from the Bible. So, man, let your kids see you in the scripture, reading the word, right? Be in prayer, even if you're not praying with your kids and your wife, and there's seasons when this is hard to do. Start doing it, a little bit here and there. Take opportunities to do it. Let them see you, in the word. Let them see you going and seeking counsel from a community of people who are pursuing Christ-likeness. One of my favorite things about the community that we're in at our church is we have a group and we meet together outside of, we have our corporate worship at the church, but then we meet together outside of that time and we wrestle with the word, and the kids are upstairs playing, but they'll come down and get a snack or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I just love that they see a group of people with their Bibles open.
Right.
And they're wrestling with stuff, and the kids can listen to what we're talking about. And they just get to see this model of, because parenting's not about perfection, right? It's about purpose and finding that purpose and that pursuit of what it looks like to excel in that area. Because we'll never do it perfectly, but we're pursuing that.
Yeah.
And so, I think, this extends beyond the home, obviously. It's super applicable for work and, corporate world as well. But I think that the home is the first battlefield. So I would just encourage men to...
Man, that is the battlefield.
Yeah.
And, at Mighty Oaks, we say that we have, kind of three goals, right? It's saving lives, it's restoring families, and then changing legacies.
Yeah.
And those three things exist for a purpose as we look at what we do. Well, the saving lives, we deal with so many broken people who have attempted to take their lives or will or whatever. And so we want to intervene there. But then the restoring families, when the family is restored, that's a generational impact, but that is a cultural impact as well. That's where culture, if we could see this happen, would begin to heal, is when the families are put back together. I was raised in a very blessed situation, and I know that. And, again, doing the work that we do, I've heard thousands of stories of folks who were raised in very, very bad situations. I was extremely blessed to have the mom and dad that I did. But my dad, he's a pastor, so he said a lot of things. But as a dad, mostly what he did, particularly with me as the oldest son, was just take me with him, and he went and did stuff.
Yeah.
I remember as a little kid going to like hospital visits and watching him sit and pray and be very kind to people who were in the worst situations of their lives, or go and do something for someone or whatever. I was just with him all the time, and I remember a lot of the things that he said, but more than anything, growing up, I remember the things that he did. And so as I became an adult and then had kids, I've done so many things wrong. And I've talked about that as well. But where I've done things right has been trying to emulate that example of, let me show you how to care for people.
Yeah.
And again, I've done a lot of things wrong, but to what you were just saying, that's where you win. That's what leadership really looks like.
Yeah.
I can say a bunch of stuff, but really I just want to show you what this looks like.
Yeah. No, that I appreciate you sharing that, because it is, our actions are going to, far outweigh our words, right? And we say this stuff all the time, but it is so true. And, we've been talking lately about this Men of Action platform that we're looking at. It's because of what we're talking about right now. It's because of what we're talking about. It's because of that example that you just gave. And, to be clear for the listeners, neither you or I are up here saying this is how you do it perfect. We're just up here saying, hey, let's encourage each other to do it better, because same here. I there's times when I don't, lead at home properly, but I am setting an example even in those moments, right, of how to reconcile that and where to go to find, encouragement through that time. Yeah. Because the world doesn't hate leadership. It hates biblical leadership. It loves again, I'm not attacking these guys, but just it loves the Andrew Tates, the Liver Kings of the world. It loves, they got millions of followers because the world loves
strong, confident people.
Yes.
Even if they're strong and confident in the wrong thing. Go in the wrong direction. I think most people are insecure and afraid.
Yeah.
And so when they see someone that is strong, loud, aggressive, that's who they get behind
Yeah.
because they think, well, that guy, that girl, that that man or woman, they have what I don't have.
Yeah.
And so they get behind it, but they don't recognize it for what it is.
Yeah.
And it's just other scared, people with their own insecurities projecting.
Absolutely.
It's not real leadership.
Yeah. It's broken people trying to lead a broken culture.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really what it is. And I think that's an important topic to talk about is how to lead in a broken culture.
Yeah.
And, we have to stand on truth, right? We
Right.
have to be courageous.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have to be loud.
Sure.
We can be loud with our actions, right? With our purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we have to yell and scream and,
Right. Right.
be angry, right? We can be anchored in truth, but not be angry. And so I think, when it comes to leading in a broken culture and a broken world, you have to stand on truth and you have to be willing to step forth and, fight that battle in a loving and compassionate way,
Yeah.
right? It's not just the angry, over aggressive, yelling man. It's not the, weak, mild,
Correct.
too much, too much sympathy, too much tolerance. Man, you have to find the blend of those things in order to your point, find the healing in the culture that we're struggling with today.
Well, and we go back to that example of Jesus. I think people get this idea of Jesus in their mind, and it's this idea that Jesus was very soft, and kind of that image that we often have of Jesus, and it's just not that at all. He came, his human father, which would have been his stepfather, was a carpenter, and so Jesus would have been raised in that, building houses and doing the things that a carpenter would have done at that time. He traveled all over the region that he was from during his ministry, which was walking many, many, many miles a day and living, outside and in different places all of the time. This was hard living, doing the things that he had to do to stand up against a lot of oppression and constantly dealing with people that were not only against what he believed, but were saying things like, we need to kill him and we need to do all of these things to him. And yet he continued. And so that was a very hard way to live. And then eventually standing before a judicial body that just needed him to deny that he was God. And if he had denied that he was God, they would have released him. He did not deny that he was God. One of the proofs of his deity was that judicial body said, "Are you God?" And he said, "Yes." And they crucified him for that, for blasphemy. Murdered at the hands of his creation. The Apostle Peter at one point said, we're gonna protect you. And what did Jesus say? He said, "I'm God. I could bring legions of angels if I wanted to defend myself. But I have a job to do." So even when he did not have to go to the cross and endure the crucifixion and all that went along with that, he didn't have to do that. He did it because we needed him to. That's hard living.
Yeah.
People always point to Jesus going into the temple and creating a whip and driving out the money changers.
Yeah.
That's a great scene, but
I love that scene.
it's one scene. The entire ministry and life of Jesus Christ was doing hard things. We talk about doing hard things.
Yeah.
But he did them with humility. He did them with compassion. He was strong when he needed to be strong. He was humble when he needed to be humble. That's what biblical leadership looks like.
Yeah.
And that is the role model that particularly men should follow. I'll be strong when I need to be strong. I'll do the hard things. I'm not going to bend in these areas that are very important. I'm going to fight when I need to fight. I'm going to step back when I need to step back. And it's having the wisdom to know which is which.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, they like to fight and project and do all the man stuff because they think that's what manhood is. I believe in being able to defend your family. That's why, I've taught my kids how to shoot.
Yeah.
That's why I shoot regularly. You train shooting. I mean, that's kind of your life.
Yeah.
But just as a guy, I do that and train that because I need to be able to defend my family. That's what a man can do.
Yeah.
We talked about jiu-jitsu on one of our last episodes. I train in part because I need to be able to defend myself and my family and others. And I think knowing how to pull off to the side of the road when you see someone in a car accident and know how to render first aid, right?
Yeah.
This is what men do.
Yeah.
But men can also sit down with someone that's dying, sit down with a child that's hurting, sit down with someone that doesn't know what direction to go in their lives and express compassion.
Yeah.
A man is someone who's well-rounded. And again, we see that in the example of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's what manhood is.
Yeah.
And that's how it's lived out or should be lived out in a very confused, upside-down culture.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, every man will lead, either passively.
Sure.
Right?
That's a great statement.
Or
yes.
purposely.
Right.
Like you're going to lead.
You're going to lead one direction or the other.
One direction or the other. I guess as a challenge to myself and anybody else, don't shy away from that. Step into that.
Right.
And surround yourself with systems, put systems in place to help you be successful, which we talk a lot about, right? Yeah. Be in prayer, be in the word, be in contact with your corner man, be in a community of people that can spur you on and wrestle with this together.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to be pursuing that, or else you're going to fall into that passive world of you're leading, but it's passively.
Yeah, that's right. And that system is really important. And people ask, so with all of this, people then, the natural question is like, okay, well, how do I develop
How do I start that?
Right?
Yeah.
How do I do that? Because this can also almost come off as like leadership philosophy or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to distinguish between leadership environments and leadership itself. There's a difference between doing leadership and being a leader. When I was in the Marine Corps, we had our tactics, techniques, and procedures. We went to schools to learn how to lead in very specific environments. Law enforcement, same thing. You go to schools to learn how to lead in very specific environments. That's doing leadership. The problem with that is people think that is leadership, so they leave those environments and now look around and go, oh man, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
This is why you leave the military. I'll tell myself, right? Like, this is why I left the military and then thought leadership was yelling louder and, you could be my kids or somebody I worked with, and I'm going to be so aggressive and over the top that I'm going to get what I want. Like, that's leader. No, I'm just being a good leader.
Yeah.
No, you're being a jerk.
Yeah.
That's not leadership.
Yeah.
That was very situational. And so to me, leadership is understanding the difference between doing leadership and being a leader. A leader is someone who focuses on the character that creates this person who's strong when they need to be strong and humble when they need to be humble and wise when they need to be wise and can stand up when they need to stand up and do the things that they need to do that a leader is called to do. Again, I've talked about this, but 2 Peter chapter 1, there's a list that Peter says, after you've understood faith, add these things to your life. And I often go to that list, but it's developing the qualities of a Christian, the qualities of a follower of Christ, the qualities of a leader. It's being a leader. And then from that, the outflow of that is good leadership.
Yeah. What are some of those principles for you in your own life?
It's the focus to me on character is being the right person on the inside. Because if you're the right person on the inside, then again, what will flow from that? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, the Bible says.
Yeah.
And really what flows out of us comes from the heart or
the
seat of who we are.
Yeah.
And so it's in that list, there are a number of things, but it's things like knowledge and wisdom and integrity and purity. There's even this understanding of brotherhood, of having the right people in your life to encourage you. And it's focusing on those aspects of being, we could just say that's being a good human.
Yeah.
Certainly being a good Christian, a good follower of Christ. Focus on those things, and from that will flow good leadership. Because back to kind of where you started in the beginning, we were created to be leaders.
Yeah.
If we were created to be leaders, then we just need to lean into what we were created to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes intentionality. It takes...
That's right.
Sitting down and saying, I want to do this with my life. This is what I want to pursue because this is what's healthy for me. This is what's healthy for my family. This is what's healthy for my community. And so, we kind of hit on it, but obviously got to be in the Word, right? You got to be in prayer. You got to be constantly in conversation with the Lord. Community's so huge. You got to be surrounded with a group of people that are going to hold you accountable and that you can hold accountable, right? You need a mentor, and you need is it a mentee?
Mentee.
Would it be a mentee?
Yeah, sure. Someone you're mentoring.
So let somebody, mentor you, but also look to mentor somebody else, because that's going to grow. Once you get these things figured out, right? Yeah. So once you get some of these things figured out, that's going to help you grow as a man in itself. Obviously, you have, parenting and struggling with what it looks like to be a husband. All those things will shape your character, but it takes intentionality to pursue how to do that correctly, or else you're just going to do it wrong. You're just going to do it wrong, and we see it over and over and over again. If you don't pursue how to do it correctly, I've said this before, it's like, you want to be a jiu-jitsu black belt? Well, you have to go and you have to train X amount of days a week, right? You have to do this, you have to do that. You got to learn this system. You got to learn this routing system. You got to learn this open guard, this close guard, this attack route, right? I have to put these systems in place and actually pursue it, or else, people laugh at you if you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a jiu-jitsu black belt. I'm never going to go to class.
Right.
Like, okay, well, that's what you're doing in your marriage when you don't do any work. That's what you're doing as a father when you don't do any work, when you're not putting any systems in place to be successful. Yeah. So put systems in place to be successful. Regularly check those systems. Allow people into your life that are also going to help you check those systems, because that's the only way we're going to start to, heal our society.
That's good. I think, one of the challenges, and we've talked kind of all the way around this, but one of the challenges is like the practical application of this, right? Isn't it really interesting? I don't know, 3 episodes ago or something of our podcast, I did, it was, you weren't here for some reason, and it was me and Kyle Wachowski.
It was punching people in the face or something like that.
Yeah, something. Oh, you were fighting. Maybe that's what you were doing. But Kyle, if you haven't watched that episode, he was a MARSOC Marine and just told his stories. Great episode, great conversation. And we talked about being a Christian in the military and being a Christian in the Marine Corps. And he talked about that. We talked, through that. Just today, there was a comment on that episode from someone that I don't know. I assume, based on the comment, that they're in the Marine Corps now. And the comment was something like, one of the struggles that I have with this is I am being asked to do things as a leader in the Marine Corps that I can't do. Things like, haze younger Marines and, lean into them in ways that I don't think is appropriate. I believe in a standard. I believe in consequences for not following through, but I just can't do it the way that I'm being told to do it or being asked to do it. That's as real life as it comes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that wasn't really a question. It was more of a statement in that comment. But how do you address that? Because I think that speaks to the heart of this conversation right here. As a biblical leader in a confusing environment where you want to lead, but you're being pushed in a direction that you shouldn't be pushed. But it's a direction that is accepted in that environment. We've both been in environments like that. Yeah.
This may sound lofty or in the clouds, so to speak,
probably
what people say.
Will. Yeah.
But here's my thing is, are you pursuing that thing as your identity? And so you're allowing your character, not that this person was doing this, right? But you're allowing your character and the person who you say you are to be shaped by that culture in that, or are you pursuing Christ as your identity? And so when you pursue Christ as identity, no matter the outcome, right? We talked about this before, obedience without determining the outcome, without considering the outcome. You have to do what you feel like the Lord is calling, what your convictions are, feel like the Lord is calling you to do. And that might mean that you get a demotion or potentially lose your job.
Right.
And that's the lofty side of it, right? People can sit back and be like, oh, that sounds great. Your head's in the clouds. Well, no, because at the end of the day, I trust in what the Lord has called me to do. I trust in his protection over me. And so if I stand firm in a conviction that I have no doubt is grounded in that truth, then I can also rest in the full peace that I will be protected no matter what happens in that shenanario.
Yeah, that's good.
So again, that's hard to do, man. That's so hard to do. We've been in these positions before. Both of us have, where I've seen people get fired for sharing the gospel with a prisoner in the backseat of their car.
Yeah.
Because the leadership thought that was inappropriate. And so, again, that's to my whole point is the world doesn't hate leadership. It hates biblical leadership. Because that person could have shared some thought, some leadership principle with the person in the backseat of the car, they wouldn't have got fired.
Right.
But because they shared a biblical leadership principle, they got let go.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do when that time comes? Are you going to fall to the ways of the world, or are you going to stand strong and firm in what you feel like the Lord is convicting you as a man of God?
Yeah, that's good. I think there's there is a line. So, a lawful order is something that you're obligated to follow, right? And so you start kind of there as like, well, as long as no one's telling you to break the law, then you need to do what you signed up to do. But there's so much gray area there. And I'll tell a silly story. It's not silly. I think about it often and regret this. As a leader in the Marine Corps, the way that I allowed discipline to happen for some of the Marines that worked for me, and this wasn't unlawful, it wasn't any of those things, it was just unkind, and it was unthoughtful, thoughtless. And I would try to make a point that I was in charge, and what you did was so horrible. You had to deal with the maximum extent of punishment, even when there may have been a reason you did what you did.
Yeah.
Now, some people need to be maximum punished.
Sure. Yeah.
But instead of approaching it from the standpoint of, is there an opportunity to teach here? Is there something else that can be done? You need to be thoughtful in how you approach leadership, even in those environments. Yeah. And some of that comes down to being able to articulate, look, I can't do this the way you're asking me to do it, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold this line. Here's why I can't do that. Here's what I feel about that. And so it's just being very thoughtful, but it's falling back, as you said, it's falling back to who you are. And again, we're using a comment from someone I don't know. And it sounds like the expression he was trying to make there was, I'm trying to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe he's trying to do the right thing. But that is a challenge.
Yeah.
And the encouragement, I think, is, understand the guidelines, understand what you signed up to do. Within the context of those guidelines, do your job, do it well. But at the end of the day, you are responsible first to God for what you do and how you lead others. And you need to lead with integrity and in a way that reflects who you are as a person of faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. It's tough, though.
Yeah,
and that's where it gets real. You coming from a law enforcement background, I mean, we see this all the time. Everyone's carrying a camera with them now. And so you see this all the time where, in hindsight, you can look at the officers who were standing around and ask the question, why didn't someone do something?
Yeah.
Why didn't someone stop that? Why didn't someone prevent that? And the answer often is they just weren't being true to who they really are.
Yeah.
And a day removed from that incident, they would have thought better and done better.
Yeah.
But they get caught up in what's happening instead of standing up for what they believe is right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100% true.
Yeah. It's good.
That's all I got, man.
There's a lot there, though.
No, absolutely, yeah. And we can flesh some of this more details out later. Maybe we'll get some good questions in the comments again.
Yeah, and we will. And I think for me, at the end of the day, good leadership is selfless leadership.
Yes.
And if you are leading the way that you're leading, doing what you're doing to get something out of it, not to get people to do their job. That's why you're there often.
Yeah.
But to personally gain something, you're trying to manipulate people to get them to do what you want them to do. Then you're not leading anymore.
Yeah.
You're manipulating, and that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, I hope that was a help. There's a lot of talking, at least.
Yeah, it's good.
We talked.
Yeah.
I hope this helped. This is a big conversation, and man, as you said, Sean, the family is where this starts, and making a decision to be the leader that you were called to be and making a difference in the lives of those around you is huge. That's how we change culture.
Yeah. And we're going to flesh this out just as a teaser for people who stayed around for this long. I mean, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to create some courses about this specific topic and all the intricacies of this topic,
right?
Just as a resource for people to again try to what we're talking about is impacting culture in a positive way.
And we don't have it all figured out, but we do have the advantage that we sit in a seat where we work with a lot of leaders.
Yes.
I mean, not like 2 or 3, thousands of leaders have come through our program, or the program of Mighty Oaks. And so hearing what was done right, what was not done right, seeing how good and bad leadership impacts people, and really trying to extrapolate some of those lessons to teach others is what this is all about. Yeah,
that's important. I also think, again, we're not the example. We're just pushing forward the initiative, right? You and I have also sat with a lot of broken people.
Well, that's the result of bad leadership.
Exactly, right? So we've sat with a lot of broken people through the programs, through your time as a Marine, through your time as a pastor, obviously through our work at Mighty Oaks here, through my time in law enforcement, my time as a house church pastor leading a group that I lead right now. I mean, we're seeing the results of poor leadership and the brokenness that it creates.
Right.
And so not only do we get the opportunity to sit with leaders and see how to do it successfully, we see what happens when it's not done successfully.
Right. That's right.
And so the whole point, right, is to create, this initiative, right, this action, this men of action pursuit to help men lead the way they were designed to lead. And not just men, right? We'll have other initiatives going on, but initially and specifically, we'll be pushing forward, calling men to be men of action.
That's it. It's good. Well, good. A lot there and more to come, but I hope that was a help to you. And I haven't ended this way in a while, but here's how you need to end, right? Here's how I should end. I forget sometimes. But when the bullets are flying your direction, when things are blowing up around you, you only have 2 choices. You can stay where you are and die. That's a decision that you can make. Or you can make the better decision and march. And hopefully today we've given you some principles, some perspectives that'll help you march. But I really appreciate you joining the conversation. Please subscribe if you have not. And when you get those emails into your inbox, check them out. A lot of good content there for you as well. But I appreciate you. We'll talk to you next time.